Hi, this is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Thursday, January 14th edition of the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer, the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast, wherever you want to say it, you call it. I have the unique pleasure of having Andrew Muller from Andrew Muller Creative. I normally focus on myself, more on the SEO and content and technical SEO things. So it's nice to have somebody who is a PPC, paid ads expert here on the program this afternoon. Welcome, Andrew. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how, how do you got in the industry and so forth, and how, how you ended up starting Andrew Muller Creative.
Hey, Bill, good to see you. Um, yeah, well, I worked for other people first. I think like most entrepreneurs,
Sure.
and then you see the cracks, and you'd
Mhm.
love to fill them, and then you go out on your own, and then you realize you are just one giant crack yourself, um,
Sure.
and kind of learn the hard way. I've worked in advertising for quite a long time, over a decade now, and one of the things that I saw consistently popping up is that the way that you would run a new marketing campaign, these are often just tossed on me with no autonomy for me to actually
Sure.
fix it. Um, is Here is what we thought was a good idea for the marketing campaign. So we're going to spend like 40 grand on it. And there's not really any data collection. They're like, oh, well, you collect the data on the back end. It's like, yeah, but you already decided the strategy and you're not willing to change it.
Yep.
So it's like, what data am I going to find out? Like the whole thing needs to be tested from scratch. So that was always a problem, especially if you work in a larger corporation and it's like, oh, this is what the board thought was good. And it's like, so you have
Sure.
five non-marketing guys or ladies deciding what the idea should be. And it's like, I've been doing this for a long time. I never get it right the first time. I'm here to fail up and make really quick, inexpensive
Mhm.
mistakes, so that we can find the thing that works. So um, that was definitely a big motivator for me as I started developing my own company and my small team.
Yep.
Is how can we do things differently? And what people do right now is they run long, expensive tests that need approval at 10 different levels.
Sure.
Um, and then you get way too many numbers back to even sort through to even know what's going on. And then the marketing agency writes you some report and they say, oh, well, since last year, like our bounce rate has gone, we have more page views, and it's like there's not really just this connected funnel. And it's like, hey, listen, this is where people are entering their funnel, this is where people are
Yep.
getting stuck, this is what we're fixing next, and if we can increase that by 5%, like our revenue is going to increase by this, right? Like it's not that clear. It's just like I see these reports, like I see people paying just like $10,000 a month on their management, and I'm just like, I don't even know what this means. This is my field. Like this,
Sure.
it's just a lot of numbers that definitely nobody running like a John Deere dealership is gonna know how to how to
Yep.
interpret. And it's like,
Exactly.
well, I guess I don't know what's like the phrase. It's like treat them like mushrooms, keep them in the dark, and feed them crap, um,
Mhm.
or something, I guess, less kind. Um, but yeah, so for me, I say, well, how can we run tests really, really cheap and run them really fast so there's not a lot of consequences and be able to pivot? I mean,
Yep.
I think the average agency is going to come up with like one or two ideas a month, maybe one or two ideas in 3 or 4 months. Like new real ideas, like not like, oh, we're gonna test one new headline this month, or like we're gonna make a page.
Sure.
Like, so like it's like, hey, this is our strategy. If I'm working on an account that's humming along, like sometimes I can get two new tests in a day, which is pretty nice. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so we try to run our tests. Like I just put copy, like a headline, or a customer motivation, or a customer objection in
Hmm.
just a really, really simple Facebook ad. There's
Okay.
no text other than in the image,
Yep.
and we run it for like 400 impressions, just nothing. And I just want to see if there's signal. I'm not looking for statistical
Sure.
certainty. I'm looking for interest. Like 20% of these tests are going to be wrong. So it's like,
Yep.
but it's totally worth it because I can run like 200 tests in a month instead of like 10.
Yep.
So, yeah, and we spend like, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe $4 on one of these tests. And, I just try to run a lot, and that's kind of what inspires me and drives me right now is I really love the idea that not a lot of people are doing this, and I think that people will slowly get the hang of it. But you know who Neil Patel is, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Neil Patel recommends that you run a landing page to 100 conversions before you can decide whether version A was better than version B. 100 conversions.
Yeah.
Like, that's so many conversions. It's like, for
Yeah.
me, I need 30 views. I don't need 30
Sure.
conversions even. I just need 30 views, and I'm just going to I'm going to look at every one of those heat map recordings, and I'm going to
Mhm.
get the data that I need to say, hey, here's what the next variation should look like. And it's like, well, but you don't have a statistical certainty on it. It's like, I'm not going to use that variation anyways because I'm at variation C and I want to get to variation Z, like where our
Yep.
conversion rate is triple this. Like, how are you going to get to Z if you have to need 5,000 clicks for every single friggin' one you're doing? Like, you're never going to get there.
Well, I mean,
And it's
certainly
like you're
that
going to
could work if you have, if you're dealing with, 500,000 page views a day, a million page views a day, certain, and and there're not going to be a lot of, sites in that situation where they're running, they're paying where they're paying $50,000 a day in Google ads, right? I mean, so
right, yeah, and if
sure,
you
if
do
you
have
have
that
that
much,
luxury,
like,
that would be great. Yeah, 100 conversions, sure, but most businesses, especially nowadays, then we're talking about even small businesses. There's no way that, I mean, they would be lucky if they get 100 conversions a month, really. So,
yeah, that would be lucky. Yeah, especially for a small business, but even for the larger business, like we do this for larger businesses, and we have $50,000 budget. It's like, well, we can run a lot more tests than
yes,
than
exactly.
like it's like
Yep.
why waste that money? So for me, generally you kind of have two paths because we have like our testing funnel, and it's like
Hmm.
where we have we don't need a lot of budget to that. It's the labor is far more expensive than the ad spend at that point.
Sure.
And then once you have formalized that, you go, okay, well, here's our sales funnel. Our landing page converts at like 20%. Our upsell page converts at like 10%. We're making profit. Now you kind of have this regular funnel and you can throw your traffic through your other
Yep.
$40,000. And it's like, oh, we're making profit off that. And then we have kind of our testing incubator on top of that. So, there's lots of ways to do it, but like you go to like Microsoft, it's like, do you know how many tests they run a month on their internal products? Like, like 250,000 a
Sure.
month,
Yep.
right? And it's like, do you know how many tests Netflix? I don't actually have the data on this one, but like, you know how many tests Netflix is running to make sure, like if you're a different type of user with different views, like they'll show you a different movie cover based on your previous preferences, and they have to
Yep.
test that and make sure that actually works. It's a nifty idea. I don't know if it works, but I know how they run their company, so I bet you it does if they're doing it because they can
Sure.
probably verify that. And it's like, yeah, you have more traffic, just run more tests because that's just like every winning test is another bump. And also all your funnels are always like slowly decaying too, and your conversion rate is always slowly dropping the longer that they're out there. So another reason you want to keep bumping it up. But yeah, like using this method, it's like I've had landing pages with conversion rates of like 2 or 5% sometimes, and in a month it's like 30. It's like, oh, great.
Yep.
I mean, that's a pretty hard thing to do on like a tough B2B niche or something like that. But for the consumer oriented product, totally doable.
Yeah, definitely. So the concept is, that basically you're taking some budget and you are running tests on Facebook and running these Facebook ads, and and then essentially testing out the copy, correct?
Yeah,
And then
testing out it.
using that to and using those results to kind of tweak the Google ads. copy.
Yeah, I mean, you can pull it to anywhere, to LinkedIn, or it's like, hey, what should our homepage be like? Half of our traffic
Sure.
goes to the homepage.
Yep.
Shouldn't you test that and make sure that that's a really stellar piece of copy? Here's another thing I might test: testimonials. Like, which of our testimonials grab people's attention at the forefront, like when they're
Yep.
just scrolling around? Because like if you have a really hard to crack niche, in say you're doing Facebook ads, I mean, you might be doing Google ads, but it's like you need to have the right testimonial up there. One tactic I used to crack a difficult niche I did earlier this year is like we had a carousel and we had the testimonials in the carousel, and they did lead into each other. Like where if you had read two or three of the carousels, like it kind of
Hmm.
created a story for that you started to understand the product and built the credibility.
Sure.
So it's like, well, which testimonials should we use? We've got like 500, and it's like, well, why don't we test all those testimonials and see, as far as top of funnel cold traffic, which of them grab that person's attention? Because yeah, some testimonials will be better when someone's further down your sales funnel versus when they're at the top.
Sure. Obviously, I know that people might have questions about the fact that, okay, well, Google Ads, if our text and Facebook ads are Facebook ads. Typically, there's a graphic or something in the Facebook ad. Does that make a difference in any of the testing where there's a graphic on and certainly if you're testing Facebook ads, you would want to display different, when you test different, not only ad copy, but you would want to test, different graphics and so forth. But if you're just going for testing the copy, what are you doing as far as the graphic goes?
Well, we test the graphics too. Usually I'll wait until I have some winning copy before because usually the copy is going to give some context to those images, right? So it's like I'm not going to start by testing images. I'm usually going to start by testing copy on its own, and then I'll usually
Sure.
pair the copy with an image because the person does need context, like an image. Actually, here's a funny test I ran. I had this test. Um, and one of the images that we used in the test was like that black and white like nuclear warning sign or whatever.
Yep.
I think it's from a video game or something. But and it paired into the story that we had, right? And
Sure.
but all the traffic I got from this ad was just garbage traffic, and it took me so long to realize, like way longer than I'm far embarrassed to admit. Um, uh, like to realize it's like people are just clicking on this, looks like a warning. Like they
Yep.
are not interested in the content. So yeah, having some context is actually really important for images. So what I thought I heard you saying is if you send Facebook traffic to a landing page and if you send Google ad traffic to a landing page, do you need to have different images? Like, is that going to impact
Yeah, I
because
mean,
of
there's
where the
that
person is
also. I
coming
mean, certainly we can test that, but as well as just the Facebook ad, if you're trying to just looking at testing ad copy only, I mean, obviously the Facebook ads require an image typically. So
from? Right. Yeah. I just put the copy on the image. So the
okay,
testimonial, like we'll just use Canva and just yeah. So I use this image. It looks like toilet paper. The background, it's like
okay,
a wallpaper. It
sure,
has kind of a ridged look to it. But we just put it over top of that, and it seems to get people's attention because it's
mhm,
ugly. And so that is the image, and then we don't really have any other text. So we're just
okay,
testing that, and the results, I mean, like I have kind of a methodology. I have a certain amount of impressions I like and a certain amount of clicks I like, but ultimately every niche provides very, very different like click costs. For example, usually when your cost per click is low, it means the ad is effective.
sure,
Typically click-through rate a high click-through rate is associated with a low cost per click. It's not always true, especially during the election. Like ads were crazy in the last 6 months. They only
yep,
just finally calmed down in January. Um, we were seeing like our best click-through rate ads were having the highest cost. It was like, what the hell's going on here? None of this
yeah,
makes any sense. Um, so, anyways, but even if you don't have all the parameters, like, I mean, this is what I do for a living. Um, so, and and our team follows this too. Um, but if you wanted to do tests for yourself for your own business, you can just run some of these tests. Just only let them go to 400 impressions, and just
Yep.
compare them to each other. Just put some text, like make it readable so that someone
Sure.
scrolling can read the text over. It doesn't even have to be over my fancy toilet paper background. Like, because like you'll probably be working outside of the numbers I'm used to if you change it. But if you run 10 different client testimonials, like Facebook will tell you which one's a winner. It'll be like, well, this one is 0.5% click-through rate and this one's 2%. It's like,
Yep.
okay, well, obviously the 2% one is doing better. Like, and it's like,
Sure.
so you can start to inform yourself if you just cross the threshold into the void just a little bit and do something that everybody's terrified to do, which is to do some market testing for themselves and their own business. Like, this is why people pay so much for market testing. It's like, it's very common for brands to pay $250,000 for these big wide polls or surveys or whatever. And I think this is just getting cheaper and cheaper. And I think it's like now even the small business person can do it. I had a project I worked on last month, and this was my fastest ever. And I went, I think it was about 3 weeks, and I got a 6 cent ad for this client. And this was, you and I were talking earlier. This is
Okay.
actually a totally different client.
Sure.
And I think we were started at about 50 cents or something like that. And it was like, when I have a 6 cent ad, like I'm now it's time to move to the next part of the funnel. Like, cause I want
Yep.
to have cheap traffic for when I'm testing my landing pages, because I don't want to spend a lot on those landing page tests. So I want it as cheap as possible, but it's going to be pretty hard to get that down to like 4 or 5 cents. That's going to be a rough track. It makes more sense to work on the funnel at that point.
Yeah. The lowest I have actually done. I am currently, selling my house and property and so forth. And it turns out that, we already have a lot of the, real estate and realtors doing their thing. But, my goal in running some Facebook ads is just to get more views, more impressions, more people to see see the front of the house, see that photo of the house and part of the description and location. More I can get it, people do like it and share it, and I'm just looking for engagement. I think the best I've done, I'm seeing about 0.005 per engagement, and it comes out to less than a penny per engagement. And that's kind of my goal, is to just get as many eyeballs at this point, to see it as well. And
Yeah, especially for
so
something like
that's
real estate. That makes a lot of sense because it's like you only need one sale, right?
sure. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one sale. You're talking about one sale, one time. You're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of of commission or profit, if you will, for that.
Yeah, it's a big purchase.
Yes, it is. But like I said, you still, it's just, I feel like it's a numbers game, and you just literally just need more people to, more people to see it. And certainly, realtors and real estate, they have their thing. I'm just supplementing and getting more, more shares and so forth.
Mm.
And seems to be working, and getting just hundreds of thousands of people to see it across the country. I know that it's in we are in unprecedented times now. A lot of people are, moving out of cities, moving, from the Northeast, the New York area down to, kind of the mid part of the country. And a lot of people are moving from the West Coast, from getting out of California, and, and the Pacific Northwest to different areas of the country. So, and we just happen to be in a rural area of Texas. So, interesting times. Uh, I've also noticed though in the past couple of years, past, let's say 3 years or so, that, I do talk with a lot of local businesses and certainly in rural areas. And I tend to find that a lot of them, if it's a mom and pop business, they'll create a Facebook page and they'll, and rather than, even creating a Google My Business or even thinking about anything Google, it's interesting to me because they're considering their Facebook page, and they do a lot of, they do think about Facebook ads, local business, and especially because they can target their little, their area. If it's a hairdresser or a guy who does power washing, or, we're talking smaller business, a restaurant, obviously, they're going to have a limited area. And there's a movement I see in a lot of areas that these local businesses will just create a Facebook page, and they think they're done. They've created their Facebook page. They have their friends and followers to follow it. They do their posts every single day. I know one local business that has that does where the owner actually does a Facebook Live several times a week. Has been really successful with that. Um, and they do some Google, some Facebook ads, but they never really, made that switch you know, over to Google. And it's an interesting time uh, where there are, like I said, so many people thinking Facebook and not even thinking about Google.
Right. How many people are in your area, by the way?
I would say in my particular area, there's probably, I'd say, there's it's an area, kind of a resort type of area that has, let's say, consists of about, a dozen towns, and each one has 20 or
Mm,
30,000, sometimes a hundred
got
thousand.
you.
So we're talking about, maybe 1 million people in the area, 500,000 to 1 million. So it's a fairly
Yeah,
large
you should
area,
probably have a
but
website. They should probably
yes, you
have a
probably
website in
should.
that case.
They do create them, um, and I do see them. Um, but again, it's interesting because the ads that they tend to do are Facebook ads, and some of them have not even created a Google My Business listing, which is free. They
That's
have not
crazy to
really
me.
thinking about anything Google. So, my so uh, and the clients that I do have, that are local, some are that are local businesses. Um, it's a win because basically I can create them a website, optimize it, and it does extremely well for them, consistently. But definitely running Facebook ads and testing that and moving that over for businesses that are just, not necessarily local businesses, is definitely a great idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can see why businesses are doing that too, because like Facebook is set up to be this kind of natural. It's supposed to be that you're like they're trying to recreate a real environment, right? Like a
Sure.
real like they're taking lots of the social mechanisms in your psychology and emulating them. And there is something natural about that. Like even when you see someone doesn't have a website, they have a Facebook page. Like I automatically assume that they're like a best kept secret in town. Right,
Yep.
that's just kind of my natural association. Now that I mean the problem is that like Facebook owns your presence, and we know that they make changes all the time that could cause lots of problems for you. I mean you remember when businesses used to get a lot of exposure for free by just posting on their Facebook page, then like
Sure.
most of your followers would
Yep.
see it. Like how long ago
Well,
was that?
that's interesting because there are certain areas, certain businesses that's what they rely on. Basically, what they in fact, in certain areas of the country, in the United States, that's what they rely on. They get their followers and their friends who like the page, and they have their routine business, and so they're not, and because they're a local business, maybe it's a salon, a hairdresser, a feed store, Um,
Mm.
some, a local restaurant. Here's a special of the day. They post it, and we're now featuring this item on the menu, um, and all they really need to do is post it on their Facebook page, and they still do get that, maybe less. They do get less, probably less reach, but people do like it, and maybe the Facebook ads would work, but I still think that there are losing out on on potential customers from new customers finding new customers finding them, people traveling
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
area, people finding so that's where advertising on Google and so forth would come into play.
yeah, yeah. I hear you there.
All right, so we're just about out of time for this half hour of the Digital Marketing with Bill Hart's podcast. And tell me and the audience how we can get in touch with you. It's andrewmullercreative.com, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I just had to I'm like, yeah, I in some ways I hate the name. But there's something nice about just having it be your name. Like even if
Sure.
you're working, even if you have a team, and the government wants a name, so you have to give them one at some point. Um
Yep.
So I've always gone back and forth between that two. I know this is not really what the conversation was asking for,
Sure.
but it's like, should you have some branded posturing name, or like just, there's something like salt of the earth about just like, your name is your word. Uh, that's
Well, there is,
that sort of
yeah.
thing.
So I do have it's interesting because and we could definitely talk about this for a minute because I have the same situation where I use my last name, hartzer.com. I've had for, since 2001 or so, in my blog with billhartzer.com. And uh, I think it's interesting because, personally, I probably would never sell my domain name or sell my last name or sell my, probably
Right.
not sell
Yeah,
my
it would be
business.
weird.
But if you are looking I think part of it may be the end goal. I mean, are you creating an agency that in 5 years, once you have 100 employees and you're doing X amount of millions of dollars per per year in in billable in accounts and so forth. Sure, I mean that 5 years down the road, you could say, if you do have a unique name and brand, you put the time and effort into it, then you could theoretically sell that business. If it is your name, certainly you could sell it. You could certainly sell Andrew Muller Creative to a larger agency because there's a lot of consolidation going on,
Hmm.
and where they would take over those accounts that you have,
Yeah.
and
I,
so
I have
forth.
I have an accounting client right now, and their whole growth strategy is just buying smaller accounting firms. It's all
Yeah.
acquisitions. That's like
So
their client
definitely,
strategy.
there are different, different, the way you market that business really is kind of and set it up. I think personally is depending on, your end goal. I'm
Mm.
frankly, Harcher.com, if you look back in the web archive, my wife and I used to raise Labrador retrievers, and we were known nationwide or worldwide for, Harcher.com was a dog breeder. And we just had, one or two litters a year, but we had built it up so that there was 300 people on the waiting list for one of our dogs. And so that was went on for years. And then around 2005, or 2008 or so, I just, I we kind of stopped that business, and I put a no index on the domain for 3 or 4 years, and kind of changed strategy. And now it's my agency site. So, it
Huh.
is possible to change. And, but again, it comes down to, it is a name and so forth. And, I think part of the decision there is based on maybe, is end strategy. I think that you're
Yeah.
actually Our creative, I think that it with if you add, since you have creative on there, there is still still an option if an agency wanted to buy Andrew Muller Creative. It would be different if it was andrewmuller.com. You
Right,
might
right.
not
That's a
want
good thought.
might not want to let go of that domain, but with Andrew Muller Creative, they could certainly 301 and redirect it over to another agency.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's this is actually pretty good insight. I don't know. I just yeah, I just have thought about I think part of the decision is just like again, I like working with agencies, they have this fancy branding and then you get on the inside and you're like this is kind of bullshit.
sure,
Like it's like nobody's standing in front of here. I'm working on the front lines and I care more about this than the person who owns the company.
yep,
And it's just like so there's something nice that was part of the initial incentive, but yeah, where to go
yeah.
with it from now. I appreciate that insight. I'm gonna hold on to that. Maybe in
Yeah,
5 years
definitely.
if I
So
decide to
we can
change the
definitely
name.
probably I could probably talk another on a we do another episode just talking about those issues and that naming and branding and so forth and getting that and testing different brands, different names, as far as landing page, and even testing domains. I've tested .com versus .club versus domain name, and there is a big difference in conversions and clicks and
Hmm.
so forth between having a .com domain versus a dot whatever, because we have 1,000 different TLDs, dot marketing or
Yeah.
dot digital or dot whatever. So definitely. So
Cool.
all right.
Yeah.
So
So
Andrew
I
Muller
have a
Creative,
yeah.
and are you on social?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly do stuff through my website. So andrewmullercreative.com, and if somebody wants to talk, you can always book me on Calendly. I have a link in there,
Okay.
so that's probably the easiest way to reach me.
All right. Sounds great. This has been the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer, for January 14th, episode 48 of the podcast. Thanks again, Andrew Muller from
Hey,
Andrew Muller Creative. Thanks for joining me
thanks
this
for having me.
afternoon. Thanks.
Bye for now.